I am the king of this channel. I make the rules, but I also break these same rules that I make on this channel. And we are going to check out these WWE wrestlers were wasted in AEW. Now, I've been to a few AEW shows, and I've mostly, for the most part, I've had a great time. I've only been to 3 shows, and it's been a few years since I've went. The product has definitely went on a downward spiral over the last year and a half to 2 years or so. But again, I'm not going to wish any ill will on the company. I don't want the company to completely fall down like WCW and ECW and all these other fallen wrestling promotions that have fallen down under. Again, this is always great. It's always an alternative for a main show like WWE, especially during the times when WWE was basically unwatchable and almost made you want to quit watching wrestling forever. But again, we're going to check out this video, none other than Stunned by Wrestling. And we are not subscribed yet, but we're going to do that. And like the video beforehand, you can also watch the video down in the description down below the original video. After you're done checking this out, make sure you check this out first. Also, make sure you subscribe to this very channel you're watching it on, and that is Making My Mark's YouTube channel. Also, like the video in advance. It is very much appreciated by yours truly, Making My Mark, the King. Again, let's get into it. Let's get the talking done and get the video started.
Back in the 2010s, WWE got a reputation for treating awesome wrestlers really badly. Talent with huge potential were given bad gimmicks, they were buried by questionable booking, or just completely ignored. But when Tony Khan launched AEW, we all thought that he was going to be the saviour of pro wrestling, as he positioned himself as the anti-Vince McMahon. But years later, he's proven himself to be no better. Today, we're looking at the wrestlers WWE let slip through their fingers and how Tony managed to do exactly the same.
Some of these were really great debuts. The Andrade one was kind of 50-50. It was kind of meh, even at the very beginning. But Malachi Black, that the way that he started was good, kind of. I mean, that first match was a squash match with Cody, and then all of a sudden then he got beat like twice in a row by Cody afterwards. It was that part was a little bit iffy. But as far as this debut right here, he got a really loud pop from the crowd, attacked Arn Anderson and whatnot. Like, it was a good, fresh start right then and there. Tony Khan wasted these.
Rusev was a classic case of Vince McMahon taking a talented performer and destroying their momentum just for the fun of it. Rusev burst onto the roster as a classic foreign heel, and he had a huge feud with John Cena, but after that, the cracks started to show. For years after, Rusev found himself trapped in a cycle of bad storylines and being on the losing end of matches, and yet, in 2017, he managed to bounce.
Yep, Rusev Day was so over. It was so over that WWE actually had to lower the volume because how loud the Rusev Day chants were. And he was a heel, a bad guy, getting these babyface crowd approval reactions. Crazy.
It's back thanks to the brilliant Rusev Day gimmick. Fans were chanting for Rusev in arenas worldwide, making him one of the most popular superstars in the company. But instead of capitalizing on this trend, WWE doubled down on burying him. It seemed that Rusev was never going.
And that's another thing I've never understood when it came to wrestling. Like, why are you trying to bury or destroy someone's reputation for getting themselves over? Hell, sometimes it's the things that you presented with them. And it's just like, oh, no, we wanted the crowd to laugh at you and not really agree with you and be with you. But instead, they actually like it. No, why don't we just make you into more of a joke to where you're unbearable and no one wants to see you?
Going to get the push that he deserved, all the respect. When he was released from WWE in 2020, everyone sighed a breath of relief. Finally, he was free from Vince McMahon's clutches. At this time, Tony Khan could still do no wrong, and we all still believed that he was the opposite of Vince McMahon. But sadly, the booking of Miro would end up being one of Tony's first big disappointments, and an early sign that he wasn't the genius that we'd hoped he'd be. He debuted as a goofy sidekick to Kip Sabian. We all hoped that Miro was going to be a big single star, so being stuck in this tag team just felt like he was treading water. After that came the only good part of his AEW career, where he became the Redeemer, an absolute wrecking machine that was supposedly sent by God to dominate the competition. This was Miro at his best. His promos were intense, his matches were brutal. It felt like
I was there for his match at Full Gear in 2021 against Bryan Danielson, which was actually supposed to be Bryan Danielson versus Jon Moxley, but Jon Moxley had to go to rehab during that point. And that was a great match. Rusev versus Miro was a pretty okay match. I said Rusev versus Miro. That's a botch. But Miro versus Eddie Kingston is what I meant to say for the TNT title. That was a good one. Hell, even the match that he lost to Sammy Guevara, which he shouldn't have lost it that soon, considering he was starting to have a dominant reign and had a pretty decent booking at that point. But again, I digress. Let's just continue watching.
Tony had finally cracked the code on how to use him effectively. But just like everything in AEW, the good times didn't last long. He ended up dropping the TNT Championship to Sammy Guevara, and then he disappeared. Injuries and creative disagreements kept him off TV for months, and when he finally came back, the momentum was gone. Earlier this year, Miro requested his release. He realised that he'd only wrestled 11 matches since December 2021, but as of right now, he's still on the roster. Apparently, Tony didn't want to let him go. While Miro's time in AEW has been disappointing with the occasional bright spot, Andrade's journey was bad right from the start. Andrade was a breakout star in NXT, where he captured the NXT title and delivered classics like his match against Johnny Gargano in 2018. But when he joined the main roster, it all started to fall apart. Instead of capitalising on his NXT momentum, they threw him into meaningless feuds, and even when he won the US title, it felt like a half-assed attempt to give him something to do rather than a genuine push. By 2021,
I think right now he's kind of been doing all right stuff. Is he still like getting the shine that you probably think he could have? No. He's still kind of a little bit in the background, but not terribly. He's still having decent matches. That whole series with Carmelo Hayes was very positive received. And even the match with Dominic Mysterio and whatnot, the tag team match at WrestleMania, that was an okay match. It wasn't like the best on the show or anything, but it still was a pretty all right match. And this finisher that he's got, the message or whatever, it works for him. It's very similar to his previous finisher, the Hammerlock DDT. So it still works, but yeah, his first run definitely could have, especially mainly on the main roster, could have ended a lot better. And his AEW career, that definitely could have been booked better.
Andrade had had enough, and he asked for his release. Of course, all eyes turned to AEW. Surely Tony Khan was going to sign up this incredibly talented wrestler, and so he did. But his debut alongside Vicky Guerrero ended up being really awkward feeling. Andrade's first proper feud was with Pac, and it delivered some excellent matches, but his in-ring ability was never in question. He's a fantastic wrestler, but the rivalry between these two men just felt empty. Things seemed to be going in the right direction when he started feuding with Cody Rhodes, but after that was done, it was back down to the mid-card. He
even lost that feud overall, especially in that weird thing where he like got put through like a burning table or whatever.
The Andrade Hardy family office, which was possibly the most pointless faction in wrestling history. Awful. He went on to feud with Sammy Guevara for the TNT title, and then in real life, he reportedly got into a fight with him backstage, which led to Andrade being indefinitely suspended. Guevara avoided any punishment and carried on as normal, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. Andrade made it clear that he was sick of working in AEW and asked for his release, but Tony denied his request. Instead, he had to stick around until his contract expired, which must have been an absolutely miserable time in his life. It's incredible to me how Tony managed to waste such an excellent wrestler on his roster. And speaking of waste,
And that match with him and Buddy Matthews on the first ever Collision episode was a really good match too. The crowd loved and ate up that match.
there was no bigger waste of talent in 2020 than Keith Lee when he arrived in NXT.
Okay, this is going to be a hot take, but I've never really been a huge fan of Keith Lee, especially his matches. His matches have kind of always been too slow for me. It's not just because the size or whatever of Keith Lee. It's just me personally, I've never really been a big fan of his matches. There's very few and far in between of all of his matches that I've watched that I've like really enjoyed. And the match with him and Dijak's not even up there as one of the ones that I'm talking about. If you talk about his match with Roderick Strong, that's a good one. Adam Cole in NXT, that's a good one. Even some of the tag matches with Swerve, as weird as that pairing was in AEW, some of those matches were okay, like with the Acclaimed. I enjoyed those.
2018, the expectations were sky high, and Keith didn't just meet those expectations, he shattered them. It was clear that he was something special. The fans just couldn't get enough of basking in his glory. Surely he had everything that Vince McMahon could ask for in a superstar: charisma, size, agility, and a track record of delivering excellent matches. But as we've seen so many times before, success in NXT doesn't always translate on the main roster. In fact, it hardly ever translated to the main roster. He did have a few high-profile matches, but none of them went anywhere. He ended up bouncing around aimlessly without any meaningful feuds or character development. It was as if WWE had no idea what to do with him. Then they slapped a new nickname on him, Bearcat Lee.
Yeah.
This came out of nowhere and it felt completely forced. And Keith himself has said that he wasn't happy with that nickname. And then in November 2021, Keith was released from the company. A few months later, it was announced that he was All Elite, and he made his debut in February 2022. And despite a strong start where he defeated most of his opponents, it didn't take long for him to end up in tag team territory. He teamed up with Swerve Strickland, and they did win the tag team titles. But after they split up, everyone expected to see an epic feud between the men, but it never really happened. It's incredible to think how much momentum Keith had coming in.
And from what I remember, I think he kept having like injuries and then also had like a health issue that was relating back to his time in WWE at one point where he like almost died or whatever, which again, just because I've disliked or never been a fan of someone, never do I want to wish, any ill will or for them to basically, be gone kind of thing, even if I dislike them. Like I never would take it that far because obviously this is life. This is wrestling. It's just a character that I don't like on TV. That's all it is. But yeah, his theme song in AEW, that's another thing I can give. I really love his theme song in AEW. It's really good.
To AEW, the fans were pissed off that WWE had treated him so badly, and they really wanted to back him as a major main event player. People love the guy, and he's totally unique, so it's incredible to me how TK managed to totally drop the ball. In late 2023, Keith suffered an injury that's kept him out of the ring ever since. He's still signed with the company, so maybe when he comes back, he'll get the push that he deserves. But I'm not holding my breath for Tony Khan to be able to manage that. Ruby Soho's WWE run was the definition of wasted potential. In WWE, she was known as Ruby Riott, and she had a great run in NXT. And it was hoped that her debut on SmackDown in 2017 would take her to the next level.
I've met Ruby Riott, aka Ruby Soho. She's a really nice person. Obviously, I think she just had a kid recently with forget it. Is it Angelo Parker or whatever his name is or was or anything like that? I know it was part of that 2.0 and him and Matt Menard situation, the Jericho Appreciation Society. I know what I'm referring to, but anyways, yeah, things seem to be going good in her personal life on that aspect, at least.
As the leader of the Riot Squad, Ruby really stood out, and their initial booking was strong enough to suggest that they might go on to be highly successful. But Vince being Vince, it didn't take him long to they ended up fading into the background pretty quickly as they took losses to the likes of Sasha Banks and Bayley on a regular basis. Ruby's singles career went anywhere. When WWE released Ruby in 2021, fans weren't shocked, but it was a bit disappointing. She had strong in-ring skills and enough charisma to stand out, but it was yet another case of the company wasting talent. When Ruby arrived in AEW at All Out 2021, she won a battle royal to earn a shot at the women's title. It was the fresh start that everyone wanted for her, and for a brief moment, it seemed like she might finally get the push that she deserved. Her first few months in AEW were decent. She challenged Britt Baker for the women's title and later wrestled Jade Cargill for the TBS Championship, but she was on the losing end both times. And then it was all downhill from there. Just like in WWE, she became a supporting player on the roster, and it was obvious that Tony had signed another wrestler that he had no long-term plans for. She turned heel in 2023 and joined Tony Storm and Saraya to form the Outcasts, which was a faction that certainly had potential. For all her talent, Ruby has never won a championship in AEW, but that's not her fault. AEW's women's division has been a mess since the beginning. Just like in WWE, Ruby Soho entered AEW full of potential, only to end up as an afterthought. Aleister Black's time in WWE started out like a dream, but by the end, it was more of a nightmare. He joined the company in 2016, and fans loved him because he was a total badass. When he was called up to the main roster, fans were rightfully nervous, and they were right to be nervous because Vince had absolutely no idea what to do with him. He ended up stuck in backstage segments where he sat in a dark room, spouting cryptic promos. Backstage reports from the time suggested that Vince didn't get Black's style or character, which is insane when you think how easy it should have been to book him. By the time he was released in 2021, Black himself admitted that his final 2 years in WWE felt like a slow death. On AEW Dynamite in July 2021, Malachi Black made a surprise appearance, taking out Cody Rhodes. His feud with Cody was intense, with Black picking up a decisive victory. Fans really enjoyed his darker and more vicious presentation, and it really felt like Tony truly understood how to use him, which was something that Vince McMahon could...
Yes, that start was really, really great. Even though he did take a few losses to Cody, he's still... The way his character was being presented was really great. And then, of course, it did eventually go downhill, and it's also been kind of a back and forth. He wins the Trios title, but then still doesn't mean anything. He's a part of tag team matches with the a part of the Kings of the Black Thrones, 2/3 of the House of Black and whatnot. Like, it's just, I don't know. I also met Malachi Black when I went to AEW Full Gear. Again, another great and nice dude. And I think that night that I went there, he had a tag match and ended up getting injured during the match or something like that. But yeah, his career in AEW has been different.
Never get his head around. The formation of the House of Black came next, which on paper was a brilliant idea. Alongside Brody King, Buddy Matthews and Julia Hart, Black was leading a group that had the potential to dominate, but it was the same old story. While Tony managed to nail the concept, he didn't know how to follow through. We didn't expect Malachi Black to be forever stuck in six-man tag team matches going forward, but that's exactly what's happened. There have been plenty of reports that Black is really unhappy with how he's being used, but he's still signed with AEW right now as we speak, and fans can't help but wonder why TK is treating him so poorly. All of these signings prove that Tony Khan loves playing a wrestling promoter, opening his checkbook and buying the services of all of these brilliant superstars. But ultimately, he's absolutely clueless when it comes to booking them.
For the most part, yes, he is. This one was a pretty great video. I've obviously already subscribed and liked the video, and let's check to make sure we've already done that. Yep. Make sure you guys go check out Stunned by Wrestling on their other videos. Again, this was a pretty enjoyable one, I'd say. But yeah, that'll do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this reaction of mine, and hopefully you guys continue to support these videos that I will continue putting out as the days, weeks, and years go by here on the YouTube. I am your host, Making My Mark. That is MakingMyM4RK. The money making, the hit making, the never stopping, always hopping into the next level. I am your host, the King, King, Making My Mark. Thank you very much.